guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be reacting to a video called Why American Companies Usually Fail in Europe. I can think of a few cases actually. I think Starbucks is not that big in Europe, and I think Walmart failed. I think it was Walmart that failed, I think, in Germany. So it is kind of weird, right? It seems like a pattern, so I'm excited. Although I'm a little intrigued, more than excited, to learn why that's the case. So let's check it out and comment, like, and subscribe.
On the 30th of December 1997, America's largest grocery chain, and at the time the world's largest company, Walmart, opened its first store in Germany. At the grand unveiling, the company spokesperson announced this as the first step to taking the continent. But just 9 years later, after expanding to 85 stores across Germany, Walmart seized all its European operations, reporting losses of more than $1 billion. This was just one example of countless massive American companies who have tried to conquer Europe and failed. Staples tried in 1998, Home Depot in 2001, and even Best Buy in 2010. All of them failed. So what was it that they were doing wrong? After all, they came from the land of capitalism, had large budgets, and enough experience to crush the competition. Yet almost 9 times out of 10, they failed.
A retail giant is closing stores. Walmart plans to shut down 269 stores. Best Buy is laying off thousands of workers, even though sales there are soaring.
Oh, but it was
in 2023,
good?
European customers spent more than $9 trillion, making the EU the second largest consumer market in the world, behind only the United States. To most people, this didn't really come as a surprise.
Yeah, of course.
After all, just like the US, multiple European countries rank among the wealthiest and most developed on the planet. And with similar populations and similar sized economies, you'd be forgiven for thinking Europe and America basically run the same ways. But in many ways, the two blocks couldn't be further apart. In 2023, about 700 million people lived in Europe, but only about 10% of them spoke English as their official language. Home to over 40 different languages, Europe is vastly different.
Oh yeah, as first language, yeah, of course. Everyone speaks English, but not as a native language or first language.
From the US. While something like language may seem trivial, this difference is just one of the many symptoms of something deeper. Something that explains why
the stores are not going to be speaking to you in English. What's happening?
Companies struggle in Europe.
Yeah, I don't think it's a language
thing. In the
thing.
1960s, Dutch psychologist Geert Hofstede set out to answer a simple question. Why do people from different countries behave so differently? And by 1980, that work became known as Hofstede's Cultural Dimensions, a framework for understanding how culture shapes behavior, broken down into 6 key dimensions. One of these dimensions, uncertainty avoidance, measures how comfortable a society is with unpredictability. And this is where things start to go wrong for America.
Oh, this is about, I don't know, maybe adaptation, your capacity to change and evolve.
American retailers. You see, in the US, uncertainty avoidance gets a score of about 46. This means Americans are generally more relaxed about rules, comfortable with experimentation, and okay figuring things out as they go. American companies also tend to operate the same way. They test things, pivot quickly, and then adapt on the fly. Some European countries like the UK also fall into this category, but move a bit to the east and that picture changes fast, with countries like Germany scoring as high as 65,
because
meaning they prefer things spelled out, standardized and formal. So when American companies show up with their "we'll figure it out as we go" approach,
they don't like that.
German consumers often find this disturbing. In 1997, Walmart opened its first store in Germany, and just like its US locations, all employees were given the company handbook. It contained over 100 different rules, but in the culture section, there was...
Don't they love rules in Germany? They should have liked this.
One rule that took priority over everything else. Whenever a customer comes within 10 feet of you, you must look them in the eye, greet them, and ask them how you can help them.
I would think that a stranger looking at you straight in the eye when you enter a store, you greet them and ask, "Hey, can I help you?" I think this probably is a German's worst nightmare.
To Americans, this was considered good customer service.
Yes.
But to Germans, with their high uncertainty avoidance scores, shopping at Walmart was a disaster. The friendliness felt fake, the small talk intrusive, and constant smiling unprofessional.
I'd imagine the small talk, "Hey, how's it going? How's your day? Why do you want to know what I've been doing?"
Customers thought, "Why is this stranger trying to talk to me?" And in some cases, this friendliness was even misinterpreted as sexual advances.
Oh my
Instead
god,
of building
no.
trust, it created discomfort. And finally, after
They
9
thought it
years
was.
of poor sales,
I'm sorry, I'm gonna rewind. They thought they were flirting. The spectacle of employees at Walmart stores in Germany dishing out unwarranted smiles not only unnerved customers, but also failed to impress them. Many German customers took this as flirting.
instead of building trust, it created discomfort.
bad.
And finally, after 9 years of poor sales, Walmart
no.
had to pull out of Germany.
No.
Another one of Hofstede's dimensions, long-term orientation, measures how societies balance tradition with change. Here, the US scores relatively
Again, it's the same thing as adaptability and changing. They don't like that,
low,
as I
which
assume.
means Americans would generally replace old methods of doing things for newer, more efficient ones.
Oh,
Something
yeah,
American
exactly.
companies
Oh, so adapting technology. So this is better? Yeah, sure, let's switch.
always been used to. Countries like the UK and Germany, however, which score much higher, tend to value long-standing traditions,
That's
established
crazy,
norms,
right?
and gradual change. In other
Oh,
words,
it's gradual. Yeah, because its technology is going to be more efficient. How come you wouldn't change? Maybe that's the thing. You have to introduce it slowly, so you don't really realize things are changing.
they don't switch to new ways of doing things just because they're more efficient. And that brings us to Best
Oh, okay.
In 20
Not because they're more efficient. They just like it because it's traditional. Well, that's interesting.
The American retail giant tried bringing big box stores to the UK. Their pitch, bulk shopping, was way more efficient. In the UK, however, shopping
Maybe
in
not
small
there.
quantities had always been the norm, and with their tendency to stick
Tradition.
with things like they already used to, Best Buy felt unnecessary. And
Yes.
after years of barely any business, Best Buy had no choice but to pack up and leave.
Oh,
Time and
no.
time again, American companies have struggled in Europe, not because their business models are bad, but because they kept
No.
trying to sell the American way of doing things
don't
to
adapt.
people who don't really care for it. It simply didn't work.
I don't know. It's quite interesting that for companies that American companies are used to changing and adapting, they don't adapt when they go to Europe.
But that didn't mean American success in Europe was entirely impossible. Once companies accepted that European consumer culture was fundamentally different,
Yes,
they
you have
stopped
to
trying
say-
to copy and paste the American model.
Oh, okay,
and started
exactly.
building Europe-specific playbooks instead.
Correct.
All in an effort to navigate those differences
That's
and
what I would
cash in
do.
on the continent's vast consumer market. But as they quickly discovered, this was going to be easier said than done. Because
Mm.
unlike what they were used to, Europe wasn't just another market. It was a collection of different values, cultures, and people that had just happened to share the same continent. In 1985, Domino's Pizza opened its first store in Europe, located
in
in
Europe.
Bedfordshire, England. Unlike its US locations, which were mostly large restaurants, things in the UK were completely different. Brits didn't eat out nearly twice as much as Americans did, so instead of opening large suburban restaurants,
Oh.
Domino's focused on small stores in student-packed areas that prioritized delivery over dining.
Yeah.
And it worked. By 1999, they'd expanded to over 200 stores, and in less than a
were
decade,
thinking.
that number had more than doubled. From Domino's perspective, the lesson was clear. They'd found a winning model. And for an American company, that meant one thing: scale it. You see, for decades, these companies have been trained to replicate whatever works, and it all comes down to how the US is structured. With shared language, media, and consumer expectations, the US is more or less a unified market, so a strategy
Oh,
that
of
works
course,
in
yeah.
one part of the country will almost always work.
You can't do that in
everywhere else.
Europe, yeah.
This is why Walmart can roll out identical stores nationwide, why
Yeah.
McDonald's sells the same menu in every state, and why Coca-Cola can use the same marketing campaign from California to Virginia. So when Domino's executives saw their delivery-first strategy take off in the UK, expanding it across Europe didn't feel risky, but instead like the next logical step. By 2012, they'd
Eating the
expanded
pizza?
to Germany, Switzerland, and Liechtenstein, and for a moment, it seemed like they
Wait, prior to 2012, they didn't have Domino's in those countries? That seems insane to
the
me.
code, up until it didn't.
Domino's Pizza is to close down all its stores in Italy.
Shut down all of its locations
Well,
in
in
Italy.
Italy.
Domino's has reportedly closed its last brand.
After it failed to win
They
over
have better
Italians
options in
with its
Italy.
mass-produced pizzas.
In 2015, Domino's entered Italy, the birthplace of pizza, with its European playbook, making pizzas as fast as possible and delivering it to people's doorsteps.
They
But
don't
in
like
Italy,
that.
pizza wasn't just another meal, it was their
Correct.
culture, something
Yes.
that had been crafted with care and eaten straight out of an oven.
And also, I would assume if you're Italian, you're probably thinking, how come an American person is going to come and tell me, hey, this is the actual pizza? It's no, what are you talking about? I want my original
Domino's,
pizza.
of course, ignored this. After all, its European strategy was working in other parts of the continent, so why wouldn't it work here? Just 7 years later, the company collapsed, filed for bankruptcy, and shut down all 29 locations across the country, a
Seems
fraction
bad.
of the nearly 800
Yes,
it
it
once
was.
projected. This One Europe strategy isn't exactly unique to Domino's either.
Very
In
optimistic.
the 1980s, Coors, the American beer company,
Yeah?
successfully expanded to the UK with its Turn It Loose advertising campaign. British consumers loved it, so they scaled the campaign to Spain. But when it launched, Turn It Loose was immediately interpreted as a common Spanish expression meaning suffering from diarrhea. And just like that, the brand image was destroyed. Time and time again,
No.
American companies have failed in Europe because they underestimate the time, money, and commitment required to succeed there. They treat Europe like the US, a collection of similar markets with minor variations. But in reality, Europe is
mistake.
far too diverse for this logic to work.
Yes.
In other words, a product that sells well, or a marketing campaign that resonates in one European country, won't necessarily
Yeah.
work in another, even if they share a border. Many American companies have struggled to adapt to this, and even when they recognize the problem, they often choose to ignore it, because
Oh.
building country-specific strategies is expensive, slow, and difficult to scale.
Yeah, but you need it
Europe
to
hasn't
succeed.
responded to this resistance with indifference. As American companies try to force their methods into European markets, Europe pushes back. And in 2024 alone, that pushback cost American companies more than $7 billion. American
that's a lot
companies
of money.
dominate globally, but fail in Europe, and it's not just because of cultural misunderstandings or bad strategies. It's that their entire business models are built around a version of capitalism that just doesn't exist there. In the US, capitalism has always been straightforward. For the most part, government stays out the way, creating an environment where companies can take more risks,
Yeah, it's a free
expand
market.
more aggressively, and then take the most amount of profit possible, even though this sometimes means engaging in child labour. In Europe, however, things are a little bit different.
Oh, they have
Capitalism
rules.
does still exist, but the government steps in to balance growth against
Yes.
other priorities like worker protections, consumer rights, fair competition, and environmental standards. And
Yeah, they have
even though
rules.
the amount of regulation in Europe has recently been brought under scrutiny, for American companies this causes massive issues. In 1997, when Walmart entered Germany, it did the same thing that had made it successful in the US. It leveraged its relationship with manufacturers, got massive bulk discounts, and offered customers the lowest prices on the market. In less than a month, it received an official letter from the German government: raise prices or face penalties. You
Oh my
see,
God.
instead of trying to compete, German retailers simply reported Walmart to the authorities for selling products below cost.
Oh, they snitched.
Walmart executives, who'd built their entire business on being able to offer the lowest prices, were left confused. To them, this was just competition, but in Germany,
Yes.
it was a violation of fair competition laws. And complying
Oh.
didn't mean tweaking a few policies, it meant stripping away the very thing that made Walmart
Yeah,
Walmart, its competitive pricing.
Correct.
After 9 years of struggling, it sold off all its stores, exiting with nearly $1 billion in losses. For decades, American companies have built their entire business models without strict regulations, controlling what they can and
Yeah,
can't
they
do.
leave them unchecked.
This has led to a situation whereby when said regulations are introduced, their entire business model falls apart. With labour
Yes.
laws that protect employees, Amazon can't cycle through workers to maintain a consistently motivated workforce like it does in the US.
It's
And
crazy,
with privacy
yeah.
laws that protect people's data, Meta can't bombard Europeans with targeted ads. Its
Oh,
main
they don't
revenue
do that?
source. And with competition laws that protect smaller businesses, Walmart can't operate efficiently in Europe.
It's
And it's
crazy
not
how
just that these
unchecked it is.
regulations exist, it's that they're actually enforced, something American companies are all but used to. In 2023 alone, Meta was fined over $1 billion for violating privacy laws. Apple, $500 million for
No,
anti-competitive
but yeah,
practices.
it's true. I forgot that EU has very strict privacy laws.
And Intel over
data
$400
protection.
million for abusing its market position. In fact, Alphabet, Google's parent company, has been fined so many times by the EU that it now has a dedicated section for these fines in the balance sheet.
Oh my
in
God,
the US,
don't they
however,
pay?
companies barely get punished for things like this.
No.
No fines, no breakups, no consequences. Where American capitalism rewards whoever can grow the fastest, European capitalism balances growth with social welfare. And while this means European companies are often less dominant than their American counterparts, that's always been the plan. It's about confronting the fact that their entire business model, the strategies, the tactics,
not always
and the
about money.
competitive advantages that made them successful was designed for a version of capitalism that simply doesn't exist in Europe.
Yes.
And adapting would require becoming a fundamentally different company,
Yes.
which for most of them just isn't working. For decades,
just gonna
American
work.
companies have thrived on a simple formula, finding out what works and scaling it no matter the cost. But in Europe, things have always
There are
operated
costs.
on a different logic, one where cultural nuances matter, where stability is valued over disruption, and where regulations exist not to slow down businesses, but to protect the people those businesses serve. So for American companies to succeed in Europe, they must be willing to put in the work. Because at the end of the day, Europe isn't a single market waiting to
It's
be
a
conquered.
lot of them.
It's a dozen different markets, each with its own language, culture, and way of doing business. And until American companies truly accept that, they'll keep making the same
It's failure
billion-dollar
after
mistakes
failure.
for years to come.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of the fact. It's true that I think the number one mistake, I think people and companies, I think I'm surprised that companies have made it so. Because I think with people, sometimes you go, oh, Europe as a one single thing, but of course not. Europe, it's so big. It has so many different countries, and each country has its own. It's not just its own language. It has its own cultural signifiers. And even though, of course, there are certain things that are just very culturally European, because that's just the way it goes. I think ultimately, of course, each one of them obviously has a different culture. It has a different language. It has a different set of rules, to put it like that. So of course, it's crazy to think, oh yes, I am going to grab this American company and I'm going to transport this over to Europe, and it's going to be successful from Portugal to, I don't know, Estonia. It's absolutely not. You know how many countries there are? You can't treat it as, oh, just one single thing. Because it's true that, of course, in the United States, it's just one country. And even though it's huge, it's vast, there's so many other states, and obviously there's a lot of people. But still, they share the same sort of cultural values, the same cultural signifiers, and they speak the same language. Quite important, super important. So it's kind of crazy to think, oh yes, we're going to Spain. I think it was the Walmart one, the CEO or something that was, oh yes, we're going to go to Germany, and then by 2030 we're going to be all over Europe. That's not really how it goes. That was Forbes. I would love to know what he thinks about this the Walmart case now. That it's crazy to think of, oh yeah, it's going to be super easy and I will just be able to switch everything and just, introduce everything to 1 million countries. No, that's not really possible. So in this case, it's kind of crazy to me that a lot of companies, think about this, because you would think, the big companies, obviously they spend a lot of money. They're just multi-millionaire companies, billionaire companies and billionaires. How come they're not, spending more time to, in thinking about this? Is, what? I think this is wrong, because this is not going to work, simply because there's just so many people here and so many other countries and so many other, languages and stuff, that we have to figure it out how to actually sell it to this specific market. And you can't just go, yes, we're going to do everything as it is. This is the case of Germany with the Walmart thing. That I can't believe no one actually did a market study and ask Germans, hey, what do you want? What do you want in a grocery store, or in a chain, in a store chain, or whatever it is. Again, it's just, you can't just sort of replicate it expecting everyone to sort of comply to your own sort of set of rules on how you live. Although, having said this, I'm just saying it now, I think that's a very American thing to actually expect everything to cater to you. That's just a very American concept. You think everything has to cater to you, and if it doesn't cater to you, you're going to do something, and with that introduction, everyone's going to be blown away, and everyone's going to switch over immediately. Which again, it's a very American thing. So actually, maybe I'm not that surprised, because it's a very American mentality. The whole thing of I think I can't remember the name of the Dutch, I think it was Dutch psychologist, that introduced the whole all white countries and white people of a certain, well, let's say nationalities act a certain way, and their behaviors and all of that. I actually, it's true, right? Well, that's why obviously it's something that's, in psychological studies, and I think in social studies, I think now it's something that's a model that, it's proven to be right. Yeah, but I like that I put it into, oh, you can put it into words. Yes. I hadn't thought of this, but yeah, I think Europeans just value tradition a lot more. And again, it doesn't really surprise me if you stop, 2 seconds and think about this. It's not really that weird because yes, of course, it's a continent that's so incredibly old that of course it's going to value traditions more than a fresher new continent and a new country. Yeah, it's a new country. I mean, obviously the United States is newer than all the countries in Europe. Although I know technically some countries gain independence relatively recent, they separated from the other. But yeah, sure. Ultimately, their history goes millennia ago, and they go millions of years ago, and the US does not have that. The US is sort of the younger brother, the younger sibling. So I think again, you can compare it so easily like that. And if you start thinking about this as let's say they're siblings, or again just once a family member just because of their age, it really does start to make sense. Of course, the older member in this family, in this country family, is going to be very, it's going to uphold, you have to uphold the traditions. Everything has been done in one specific way throughout hundreds of years, and it's a model that works. If it ain't broken, how is it the saying goes? If it isn't broken, like, why fix it? Yeah, of course, they're going to be thinking, how come you come along and you actually introduce new things and new stuff? That's all very nice, but we're not going to change because this model has worked for us for 100 years. And that goes with absolutely everything, because I think Europeans are just very set in their ways. Again, does this apply to everything in particular? No, not necessarily. But I think if you're going to speak sort of generally, that's how it works. I'm not saying, oh, Europe is backwards and everything is sort of old and they don't want to introduce new technologies. They're still sort of communicating, I don't know, by telegraph. No, of course not. When it comes to technologies, I think things are introduced in a very different way. But when it comes to, I think, cultural values, they just value tradition a lot more. And I think in comparison to the US, where if you come along with something new, with new ideas, new ways of making things, of doing things, that's actually going to be appreciated, and it's going to be, yes, that's what we want. Someone that can shake things up, that can do things a little bit different, and is constantly sort of thinking about innovating, or just switching things around. And again, because it's sort of the younger sibling, and it's sort of, the one's going to come, and yes, I'm fresh, and I want to change everything, I want to change the world. And of course, Europeans are going to be, what are you talking about? That stuff does not work like that. And how come you're telling me about this new model when we have done this, for hundreds of years, and it has worked? So why would we change? And I think that explains a lot of things about how come, these companies fail. Because yes, of course, it's just a different kind of mindset that's really hard to sort of change. And they mentioned this also. I think it was also about the whole, so you have to introduce things gradually, because something, not necessarily because, it's more efficient, so do it like this. No, because again, they value tradition, and that really has more importance than just something, I ended up doing this in 5 seconds. But again, the tradition, the cultural values is just something different. And I think when it comes to, again, technologies and stuff like that, you kind of have to introduce changes a little bit gradually, because that's how people are, and actually that also goes, again, people are like that. If you introduce changes little by bit, people are not going to realize things are actually changing, because it's just a small, let's adapt. Oh, it's just a little thing, let's bend it over a little bit. And that's how it goes. And when you realize, it's the whole thing, it's a circle. And you were thinking, let's bend, let's bend this wire. And it's a little bit. And now through the years, when you actually, you take a step back, it's, oh my God, you made a circle with this wire. It's a little bit like that. It's the whole thing about this little step by step in little steps. And I think that's usually the way you would go around things. Because again, people do not realize when things are changing so gradually, because no one has, the ability to step back and realize, hey, well, how come we were doing this 5 years ago, or what were we doing 8 years ago or 3 years ago? And it's only when you think about this that actually those changes actually occur, as if you can see it sort of represented in real time. And the other thing that I think is of utmost importance, and I would assume it's also the biggest hurdle, ultimately, it's also because the other things are just the behavior of people and all of that, and the consumer in this case. But the whole business model that ultimately is, the capitalist model that works in the US, which is obviously again money at all costs, and of course, child labor, work laws are non-existent. No one likes a union, and there's a lot of lobbyists for big companies obviously in the government. So they go unchecked. No one regulates them. And it's good because, again, they're earning money, and they're just huge companies, and there's billionaire companies, and that's what people like, right? But in Europe, there's just so many rules. They have standards, and they have, privacy laws, which are really, really important in Europe, and I tended to forget about them. Yes, of course, they have really big and strict privacy laws, and that's not, obviously, the work laws are also quite important, and just a bunch of laws that I think you can see, again, thinking, as an American, you can think, oh my God, but everything's so regulated. It doesn't really allow you to, to actually succeed because there are so many regulations. But I get why they're doing this but because, people are humans and we have to protect people, whether that is by, with workers' rights or just protecting, the actual human being and, their general well-being. So we're not going to, do that to we're not going to just earn more money and unchecked money to the expense of people and people's health and people's sort of quality of life. So again, it's just ultimately, I guess, why, both cases, I can see both cases. I can see why Europeans think, Americans have it backwards because it's sort of, oh my God, what about the people? How about, there's laws in place that you have to comply with, because everything you can just, this isn't the Wild West. You can't just run wild and do whatever you want to because, yes, I want to earn $1 billion. No, you can't really do that because, again, you're sort of stepping over people. And that's a bad thing because, people deserve to be happy as well and to have better sort of quality of lives. And in the opposite side, I can see the American way of, no, but what are you doing? That doesn't really allow you to succeed because how are you going to, and of course, success measured by money. How am I going to earn, billions of money if I have to go through so many regulations and if I have to comply with so many things? Yes, and I can see why. Yes, it's just two models that are just at odds with each other, and it's really hard, I think, to come. Let's get to a middle ground. I do not know. Yes, should we though? I think it's not. We kind of technically we can, sure, by changing laws and changing people's mentalities, but I think more important than that is, would you want to change? I think neither the EU or the US would want to change because, again, their model works. And so it's sort of, no, why would I want to? I don't know. Again, imagine the revolts if people were, the EU tomorrow said, no, we're not doing. Again, there's, all those regulations that are in place. No, we're going to relax them and you can do whatever you want to. There will be, wait, what? No, that's not really a thing. And in the US, imagine if things started being regulated. It's enough for the people themselves. I think some people are just going to vote against their own interest. That's always the case. But I would imagine, obviously, because they're lobbyists and they have all the money and all the power, they're going to be, wait, no, what? And that's assuming a big if the government actually would allow, this thing to happen. Because, it's going to come and you're gonna stop earning that much money. So, of course, it's really at odds with each other because they're just they're two models that don't really, it would be very hard to find a middle ground. Although I think I would venture to say a lot of Europeans would maybe, I don't know if this is the case, again, maybe I'm likening things that maybe don't go along specifically with this, but maybe I think some Europeans would like regulations to be a little bit less regulated. It's just, can you relax the rules a little bit? Because I do really believe it's really hard, I think, to come up, especially I think as an entrepreneur or someone that doesn't really come from this huge company. I think it's a little bit harder to actually make it big in Europe because, again, there's so many regulations and it's really expensive that I can see why, you would go to the US to actually try your luck because everything's unchecked. It's a little bit easier. So, again, it's really hard to find a middle ground and even harder to even think about these two huge, powerful sort of entities to think about wanting to do it. But that's it for today, and I'll see you next time. Bye!